Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining us for the February 2nd SIG K8s Infrastructure meeting. My name is Eddie Zaneski, and I'll be your host today. Just a quick reminder that this meeting and all Kubernetes meetings abide by the CNCF Code of Conduct, so please be excellent to each other. With that, do we have any new folks on the call that would like to introduce themselves?
I don't think I've ever attended one of these, but I think I know most people here. My name is Jeremy. I'm from SIG Release. Came for the discussion on the artifact mirroring. Interested in that.
Welcome, Jeremy. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. My name is John Johnson. I've also never been on one of these calls, but somebody nerd-stimed me with some doc about mirroring things, and this is very relevant to all of my interests as I work on GCR and all the tooling that the promoter uses. So you have my ear if you have questions.
That's awesome. Thanks for joining us. Cool. Any other folks? I think I recognize everyone else's names. All right. So I guess, should we start with the billing report? Let me do this. It's big. Open this up. Okay, that number looks like what we're expecting right now. So no surprises yet. Looks like we did have a little spike in storage, maybe. Not too high. That could just be the first of the month syndrome. Cool. Any questions or thoughts on the billing report? Nothing looks concerning to me, at least. All right. What else did we have on the agenda? So I said before, but Arno is going to be joining us about 10 minutes late, so he'll come in and take over. We have recurring topics. We looked at the billing report. I don't think we have any action items that aren't going to be covered in open discussion. Justin, you want to kick us off with your first topic here?
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, I am mobile, so apologies if the connection isn't great. Wait, am I the first? I thought it was the second topic, but okay. I wanted to bring up, it's very related to the other topics, and it's about thinking about how we can feel more confident in merging PRs that change infrastructure and, like, setting up some of the, I guess, theoretical best practices, which I haven't actually seen implemented in many places, where we sort of stage our infrastructure PRs and have E2E tests on infrastructure PRs. So trying to think about how we could achieve that. And I was proposing that we try to set up some sort of sandbox where we could sort of experiment with that as a community. I'm very interested in have some time if we use a Google tool called Config Connector, which lets us use KRM, the Kubernetes resource model, to describe our resources rather than Terraform. But if someone also wanted to try it with Terraform, that would be awesome as well. The Google one is a proprietary tool, but specifically to Google, but there are equivalent ones for AWS as well. So I opened an issue about that. I don't know if anyone had any thoughts or feedback on that.
Are there any pros? Oh, there's our note. Perfect. I was just going to ask if there are any pros or cons about using a cloud agnostic tool, or if we should use the in-cloud tools. How do you weigh that out?
My thought is that it is, so, you can't just take the same, the cloud agnostic tool is Kubernetes, right? And it doesn't actually support all infrastructure. Even with Terraform, you have the same language, but you have to, we can't take a GCP configuration, just run it on AWS. So from that perspective, I feel like no matter what, we're going to be using cloud-specific configurations. certainly once we step outside the application space where Kubernetes does a great job. I would rather use Kubernetes as the model because I'm more familiar with it and it's more in tune with the work that I'm doing in sort of my day job. But if by cross-cloud ones you mean Terraform, I think that would be very interesting. It's just not something I can devote time to.
Cool, Arno. I'll hand over to you as host.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everyone. I saw your issue, Justin. I think my main issue is maturity of all the tooling, all the ecosystem, because config connector is basically not support all the GCP resources at the moment we are talking about, but it's something we really need to invest because we've been talking about this for like a year now. We had a demo with Crossplane last year about this, if I remember.
Yep.
So I think right now is maturity of the ecosystem we need to think about. I'm +1 with the idea because we had an issue about this for 2 years now. We should basically have a sandbox project. We can try everything and try to test all of those toolings, but currently Terraform is the most advanced and mature tools about infrastructure management. That's good.
I think that's fair, and I certainly think like the team that is responsible for config connector, and I'm sure the equivalent ones on AWS, the AWS operators for Kubernetes, I believe, are working on that. I think the difference is I have an idea of how we could make this work using Kubernetes primitives, whereas I don't have an idea or I don't have the experience to know how to make it work using Terraform. So what I'm proposing is that we go with what people feel comfortable with or I feel comfortable with, and then we can like look at maturity like once we have something, right? Like right now we don't really have this, so I feel like let's build something, and then if we can translate it to Terraform, great. If we like what we've got with the Kubernetes model, then that's great as well, I think.
Okay. So in the issue, the problem is have an environment where we can test change, whether we use Terraform or use config connector. I think that's the core issue. So I think.
Yeah, I mean, I just said if I just want to add if someone wants to build the same thing with Terraform, I think that's great as well. I feel like we can almost do both if there is someone that wants to do Terraform and like cross-pollinate from each other. I just have like more of an insight, and there are some people that have been helping me to develop that insight at Google as to how to use Kubernetes to achieve this. So,
okay.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you in the sense that even if we use a cloud agnostic tool, we'll still have to do cloud provider specific resources. So I don't think that buys us anything other than just using the same tool.
Having dealt with multi-cloud stuff for a long time, and I was at Chef long ago, trying to manipulate fog into dealing with all the different cloud providers and trying to have this abstraction layer. It's a problem that ends up getting you in more time on the complexity of the differences and trying to get this same model. Terraform has done a pretty good job at making the primitives accessible from those specific cloud provider things as objects that you can refer to as at a higher level. So I and crew have done some pretty higher level things with Terraform with multiple cloud providers, because the cross-cloud CI and the CNCF.CI project initially was bringing up Kubernetes from source on all the cloud providers before everybody had Kubernetes as a service. And the highest level of that Terraform configuration was agnostic to the provider, and then they would be modules underneath that would reuse those. But I can go see the code base. It is a piece of engineering on its own.
So Justin, how do you want to proceed about this?
I mean, if we generally feel like this is something worth pursuing, then I guess if I have like the blessing, then I can go and like try to go and get the the sort of sandbox project and sort of spin up that infrastructure and sort of start to send some PRs. If there is someone that wants to work on this with me, that would be wonderful, but it's not required. And if there is someone that wants to work on Terraform alongside with me, that would be great as well, but again, not required.
You have my +1, so I will just drop the +1 in the issue. So I think if you are investing in this, I don't see a technical blocker about this. I think my main concern right now is cost, because well, we are under some kind of cost burden, so cost gonna be low for this issue. So I'm not really worried about that. I will just put a +1 in the issue. And
that'd be great. Yeah, I'll definitely be mindful of cost.
Also, a MVP, an interesting MVP would be to try to manage one staging project using config connector.
So I have questions, comments, concerns, I don't know, about the maintainer bandwidth in general. Like if we choose something, who is going to maintain it long-term? Justin, you may be hacking on it for the initial steps, but are we happy with choosing a solution that we don't know who the maintainers are going to be for?
I think it's early to have to answer to that question, because this is like an experiment to try what's the next tooling we want to use for infrastructure management. So we can make that decision right now, because we still need to understand what we're doing about infrastructure management at this moment. We made the decision to use Terraform long term. We still have to migrate from Bash to Terraform, but I don't also want to block us to investigate better tooling for resource management.
Oh yeah, for sure. I just I wonder if we're going to like go halfway into Terraform and then switch to something else and kind of be halfway in multiple places.
No, we need to unify infrastructure management under only one tool.
Ben has,
or at least tool like Bash. G-Cloud by default and Terraform as the main way to manage infrastructure. So G-Cloud can be the backup for everything if we fail to do something with Terraform. Now, once we have a good approach, and that's why I'm interested to do an MVP with a staging project like, I would say, K-staging boom. If we can manage that with config connector or crossplane of Pulumi, we can now see what are the blockers to migrate from Terraform to that tooling. Because I think the idea behind what Justin is proposing is basically something similar done with inside COPS. They have integration tests with something with Terraform or YAML files. We can try, but it's a good thing to explore other possibilities, because it can simplify the burden for the maintenance in the future.
Wasn't there a Google project at some point, and it was like a Go SDK for cloud generic stuff? Does anyone remember this?
Yes, because I considered using it. It's the Go Cloud Development Kit. I think it's. I'll find the link.
Hi all. Sorry I'm late. Had a meeting run over. I think I've caught up on the rest of this. I just really want to point out that we are once again kind of predicting future problems before they happen. I would really like us to stand this up, which Arnaud and I have been working on, and work with it a bit. No one has to migrate anything to depending on it initially, and we can see how reliable it is before we determine whether it won't be reliable. And we should push really heavily for the most like simple, straightforward answer, because we've kind of gone in circles on the technology for this for a couple years now.
Ben, we're not talking on the same subject. We're talking about infrastructure management. I think you're talking about the mirror stuff. So James at the ends on. So Ben, I will pass the mic to James, and we can come back to you.
Yeah, just a quick question, Justin. All of us will be able to run this tool, right? And without any issues. and all of us will have access to it, and will have access to the latest version that you will be trying, right?
Yes, it is. It is free, and it is available on any Kubernetes cluster. I think the authentication is a little bit tricky if you don't set up on GKE, but it is free. And I think more importantly though is like the basis for this is sort of thinking about why it's hard to merge PRs and why why it's scary to write a PR, why it's scary to approve a PR, how we can do confidence and learning from what KK did. So it will be very valid to just send up a draft PR if this succeeds, let the E2E tests run with infrastructure, and then you feel confident. So even if you never install it and run it yourself, in the same way that you don't actually have to, you don't have to you don't have to touch the cloud to test a Kubernetes PR. That would be my sort of goal here.
Okay, got it. Yeah, the last question is it available from the Google Cloud Shell without too much effort?
You just have, it's an add-on in the GK cluster. So I think that what Justin need to do is basically bootstrap a standard project, bootstrap a GK cluster, and just enable the add-ons, and it will be, the CRD will be provided as part of the GK cluster. That's the main advantage and also a constraint, because you need a GK cluster for that.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Sorry, any question about this? Okay, Eddie, you are running these meetings, right? And I see it. Okay, what's happening in this meeting? Because I see John, Stephen, Jeremy. Welcome, everyone.
Hey.
Yeah, so I think that brings us to what Puerco put on the agenda, which I assume is why everyone is here.
Yep.
Ben, do you want to take point on this one, or Arnaud?
I'll let Arnaud, but first I will.
I don't have the notes in the.
I need to caffeinate better. I'm sorry, y'all.
Well, I'm gonna ambush a lot of people about the subject. Okay, so yesterday we had a release engineering meeting, and I brought the proposal from Ben. I need to find that. Ben, can you post it in the chat? The link.
Yeah,
because I'm like. So I think in the document, most questions are not directly relate to what is proposed, because just to resume, we want a new OCI proxy as a replacement of gate.gci.io, because we need to migrate that proxy inside the community infrastructure. So that's the main point. In the same time, we also want to explore the possibility to redirect any Docker pull request from a Docker client to the Amazon of GCR. That's the second approach. So one part of this proposal is to push the image layers to a S3 bucket and use that proxy to redirect based on the IP source, I would say something like that. So, which means this implies some conversation with SIG release, and specifically release engineering, because we are interested to make that action release blocking at some point. So basically, before the promotion process of the container image we want to release, we want to be able to push those image layer to a S3 bucket before finish the release. I think that's the proposal, Ben. Yeah, that's the main, one of the main part that need conversation with release engineering. So I don't see a specific.
I will point out that prior to that happening, it also depends on the exact details of what Amazon Infra we wind up standing up, which is still slightly TBD, in part because we're also still in like conversations about like who will fund what exactly.
So Stephen, I have a question.
Yeah, so I agree that the images need to get there eventually. Would I say that they're release blocking? Not necessarily, or not necessarily like immediately. They should land in, you know, they should land at the proxy point, but like I don't think they need to be release blocking.
So
Like,
that's not the phrase I would use. That they should be part of the promotion process. And the technical reasons for that are outlined in the doc, but very briefly, the reason is that allows the proxy to be very dumb and reliable. And we already have reliable infrastructure for promoting. We just need it to promote to 2 places.
But at some point, basically, if we do in the image process, if we don't push those image layer to a S3 bucket and someone come from, let's say, Amazon requesting those images, it's gonna be problematic to download them or not.
Right. So one thing that we could do to, I think, address both concerns is to start by saying it's non-blocking. If it fails, we just note this and we keep track of like, you know, is this a reliable process? If it's not a reliable process, then we need to rethink and we can't migrate things over to this. If it is a reliable process, we should be able to switch it to being like promotion fails if this doesn't work.
Yeah, my 2 cents. It is like the publishing bots, right? So we tell people that, hey, the tags for the publishing staging repositories are not available. It's going to take like within a day. It'll be there, but it's not there right now. As soon as the tag is cut in KK repository. So I think it is probably something like that, right? That's
yeah,
my
yeah, exactly. That's what I was kind of alluding to. So if you think about the release process, at any one point, the reason that we send out the announcement late is because we're waiting for the tag to land in Kubernetes. We're waiting for the images to be promoted, but we're also waiting for the debs and RPMs. None of those things are not happening simultaneously, right? So there is that, like, there's an acceptable lag for it, right? But we make sure that we don't do the announcement until we know all of the artifacts are there.
That's fair, though. From an like ongoing perspective, I think it's going to be much more stable and efficient to be adding new images whenever we're adding them to the GCR. And I don't see any reason to expect that ECR S3 is going to be less reliable than GCR/GCS.
Okay. Yeah.
And if we don't do this, then we either have to have some kind of like attempt to probe if it exists in the front end, which is going to negate the whole. One of the ways we can talk to Amazon and say, please pay for this, is we can say, this makes downloads much faster and better for your customers running these clusters. If we have to add some kind of like, wait, but what if it's not really there and it pulls from GCR instead, we're not really providing that benefit anymore. And we're talking about a pretty substantial cost here. We've had to halt any like further migration of like say Prow because we are exceeding our spend, and the far bulk of our spend are these image downloads. And even if like CNCF does wind up paying it through some other means, it should be much cheaper to host all of that traffic from within the cloud it's originating. And by far that
just to be clear, yeah, just to be clear, I'm not disagreeing with any of this. What I'm saying is that like part of my concern is introducing new things to an existing process where the image promoter is maintained, right? And
right.
Like we'd have to do improvements to that. If you look at like just thinking about support for various architectures, right? We support multiple, like in quotes, we support multiple architectures because that was what we were doing before, right? So like one of my concerns is that introducing a new element into the system that still needs to be improved will lead us to not be able to always produce the artifacts that we currently are.
If we use ECR, it will be the same code path, just 2 endpoints. If we use S3, it will be very slightly more complicated to grab the layers and copy them over. I would say that, again, what we can do is, like, we will take responsibility for building this. We will make sure that failures are not blocking initially, and we can see in practice how well does it behave. If it is problematic and failing or causing slowdowns, we'll remove it and we'll take another approach to this. If it is behaving reliably, I think it should be pretty reasonable to say it is blocking to push to GCR and to the like ECR or whatever, because we need that like cost offload, and we won't be able to host images if we don't bring them into reasonable cost.
So the upside of the current jobs that are doing promotion is they're running all the time, basically, right? They're running every hour or so to catch up. So even if something is like the failures are non-blocking already, right? On kind of thinking about the artifact registry stuff as well, I've been poking around with swapping references here and there to see if we can actually support artifact registry in general. So like right now I'm not seeing too many issues that are like GCR specific. So I'm just want to be clear that I'm saying, like, I agree with this. And I think we have a lot of the pieces that we already need to do it. I'm just concerned with the state of the artifacts that we have already agreed to publish, right? Making sure that we don't affect that.
Would you at least say that it's reasonable to add this step there if it is a non-blocking step?
Oh, absolutely. Like, this is like for us, this is essentially like adding more references to the manifest, like adding more references, so it's fine as non-blocking.
I think we should start there. It's the same thing with the like registry endpoint itself. We're trying to get this set up as soon as possible so we can start making sure that's going to work and get infrastructure migrated. But we are certainly not going to pretend that it's ready to move like live image pulling from like the defaults in Kubatum day one. But we kind of need to get it started so we can see if it will be. And we'll probably look to like some smaller projects to trial it for us. And Arno has already been talking to folks about that.
And I can volunteer SIG release ones too. So
yeah, I don't think we want to basically jump directly in the the release process. Basically, this is an experiment. We want to basically see what's the best approach for this. Are we copying the image layer to an S3 bucket, or are we using a ECR public repository as a mirror for long-term usage? I don't think right now we want to basically see what's happening if we, let's say, push those layers inside S3 and see the redirect and basically see what's the impact on the cost. If it's help reduce the cost, we can try to understand how we can make that not blocking for the release process. And James, you have your hand raised.
Yes. I mean, let's make sure that we are all on the same page on, like, we have to do whatever we have to do to cut down costs. Otherwise, we can't survive, right? Like, let's agree on that. And if we can agree on that, then I think a lot of these decisions will be easier, and we can always turn things off, right? Like, we can always back out of stuff as long as we make sure that we have a path to go. Like, when we are doing stuff, let's make sure that there is a way to get back to where we are right now, where we are paying the most cost, and every little step that can help to reduce the cost, we should welcome it, right?
Yep, that's the entire point of this approach. Ben, before
I think we're in violent agreement. Yeah.
Yeah. And Josh, you have your hand.
Yeah, I mean, I would say start off, make it non-blocking and non-public, right? Just to see if it works as step 0. Step 1, I would make it actually a blocker before it's even public, because if it's a non-blocker, there may be some lag or some delay or something going on that people aren't noticing. By making it actually a mandatory part of the release process, even though it's not for publicly visible artifacts, you might catch a problem before it happens, before you have an end user that gets a 404 trying to pull an artifact. And then I would probably trial it for some small subset of artifacts that get migrated over first, but try and do it as a stage as well, and try and empathize with the end users so that they don't get glitched.
But I do agree that, first of all, it's very important that we don't like disrupt the release process. So we can start from a point where we're just like the promoter is handling this and publishing it, but if it encounters any errors, it just moves on and logs them, and we can, like, Arno and I from K8s Infra can come start checking those logs and looking for, like, are we encountering problems here? Is this going to work, before we talk about making hard blocker. I do think that it needs, before we ask people publicly, hey, start pulling from this endpoint, we need to make sure that we know all the images are going to be there and that it's just going to work. But that's a couple steps down for sure.
So just to clarify, we are not jumping from use that in the release process. No, you want just to build small piece on that until we reach the point we are sure we can do the migration from GCR to that new proxy.
Also, the first thing we're doing is a proxy that doesn't even have any additional mirrors, just so that we can start working on the problem of how are we ready to ask people to like move to another endpoint. And I think we'll probably continue to develop the proxy to do like the mirroring complications in the sandbox mode only. And we will eventually set up a public endpoint that we can say, go ahead and start switching to pulling through this, but all it does is hand you off to the one existing publishing. Nothing changes about publishing. The only thing that changes is what URL you pull from. And that's a like very lightweight service, just serving a redirect so that we can start to shift the traffic.
Yeah, we're in violent agreement, especially about just getting the proxy out there first, so that we can start to propagate the FQDN change.
Yeah, and in terms of testing non-blocking, like any promoter job that's going out and is failing, we're getting notifications on it anyway. They're going to retry eventually. We have testing like fake prod projects already for the image promoter. Like none of this is a problem.
Great. Also, one piece that I think we've only touched on a little bit, but we're definitely going to have to discuss more down the line is at some point, Tim Hawken and I will probably open discussions more with the GCR team about, okay, this is looking serious. Can we accelerate migrating traffic by updating K8s.gcr.io to point to this thing instead? Are they willing to do that? I'm not sure if that will even be acceptable, but that's something that we'll also want to take with a lot of care, because until we get to that point, clients will always have the existing K8s.gcr.io that has 0 changes. Like we're not making any change to how that works. At some point, we might want to flip that domain over to this and have something else back the multi-regional storage so that clients that are still running like old releases start pulling through this more efficient process.
So can you say more about what you mean, you and Tim having a chat with GCR? Because like that is all on community infrastructure at that point. At this point, the GCS stuff isn't.
I don't think we want to have that conversation right now. I think this is like we need to stand up the sandbox registry.
No, I need to understand what you mean by that is what I'm asking.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Let me explain. So K8s.gcr.io is not actually a community thing. What backs it is a community thing, but there's some internal Google piece where there's a special subdomain, and that special subdomain knows that it should map to these backing registries, and it actually also is doing some lifting for us to keep costs down today and better pulls by. There's a GCR in the US, there's one in Asia, and there's one in the EU, and that's where the actual storage is. K8s.gcr.io takes an incoming client and bounces them to one of those already. That is like, that's actually like the details of that happening are actually not public infrastructure, but it is important that this is a transparent move, which is why I'm bringing up that we would like to do that at some point, because that allows the community to shift all the traffic through moving through the like better funded mirrored version that has the Amazon piece at some point, because we know from the GCR.io Google containers to K8s.gcr.io move, it's really hard to get people to update and move over. And there will be a lot of people still pulling through that domain for some time, and we may not be able to cut costs quickly enough. But that's like after we think the new thing is ready, then we can start that. That said, Tim is suggesting to me that we might want to go ahead and start discussing the possibility with them, just so we even know like if they're like amenable to this, because that is not a domain that we own as a project, right? Like I can't just unilaterally change this. It's not a K8s.io domain. It's some internal Google managed thing, and it is a subdomain on their product. We'll have to find out like if they're even willing to point it at some external thing. But if they could, that's potentially something we should strongly be considering once we consider this like GA, because I think it's going to be really difficult to actually get all the clients out there to move to a new endpoint in a reasonable time frame.
Agreed. Hippie?
Before Hippie, I just want to mention something. We have someone from the GCR team in the call, so I don't know.
Double agent. I can talk to people. I mean, I think we are excited not to be involved as much as possible with anything, and so that may be amenable to us, but I can't speak authoritatively.
Thank you so much, and please advocate for that. We have a lot of binaries out there in the wild and cloud providers that are deploying these old versions, and they won't update the patch releases possibly. So the amount of savings we're going to hit, even if we perfectly execute all this tomorrow, may be low, unless we can actually shift all of the existing stuff out there by doing some fancy 302 that is still wonderfully provided by the GCR team. And that what they obligate to is just the 302 at that level, so that they can feel that the services provided by Google are awesome. They just might not be a Google Container Registry owned thing.
We'll throw a header to 302 that says brought to you by the GCR team.
But so to be very clear here, there will have to be some like internal discussions because it is a Google piece, but my intention is just to like make the community aware that we would like to look into this, because I think it will help us with our funding, and that if we get to the point where folks that actually own this have agreed to it, like I will come back to all of you with this and we will discuss it. No one's going to just like flip a switch. But I want to go ahead and throw that out there because I think that's already something that we need to be thinking about. Not something we need to be doing right now. We should not be planning to switch right now, but we should be thinking about, we're probably going to need to, even if we went back to every tool in the project and cut a new patch release on every version we support right now and said it uses this new registry, I think there's still going to be way too many clients that aren't going to pick up that release. And it's going to be a long time.
I have reasonable expectation that we won't be doing that. Also.
Yeah. So there's also that piece. But I'm saying even if we agreed to that and we went and did all of it and that happened tomorrow, I think there's still going to be a really long tail before people pick it up. So we should really consider if we can just transparently migrate clients. And then in the future, we will be able to improve this process and transparently migrate clients because it will be on a community-owned domain where at any point we can like completely redesign the whole backend and carefully roll it out. But right now, they're pulling through a Google domain.
Yeah, I think the entire point of this proxy is not only to solve the cost burden, but having something shielding the entire infrastructure from any kind of change we may want to do in the future, because we can have that basically put the proxy just for Amazon, but later we can basically say, oh, let's use Google CDN, Cloudflare, or anything we want to do. So basically that change is completely transparent for anyone trying to consume Kubernetes artifacts.
Yeah, and
I'm sorry, John, for exposing you we'll be talking about this for a long time.
John introduced themselves earlier that way. I want to make very clear too that this is when we're talking about this traffic in Amazon, this is not EKS. This is not Amazon's managed Kubernetes. This is customers that are doing their own Kubernetes on top of AWS. So this is like the COPS and the KubeADMs and all those other typhoons out there. Right? So that's what this tooling that we need to focus on is.
And to our nose point, while it will be great to get the redirector in place and we can potentially add more like hosts or some completely different design for this in the future, we're also very intentionally trying to not get too deep on that and like get ahead of ourselves here. If we can get the migration to the domain, step one, and it's just a plain redirect, then we have the ability to move clients. And then we're only hoping to do like the most like least offensive thing possible to ship the AWS traffic to something we can run cheaper and potentially funded by Amazon, because that is just such a large amount of our traffic that is really expensive right now. And that like any potential future optimizations, we can like circle back to that once we have the redirect in place and we've solved this problem and we're not running out of funds.
Rian, Hippie, when you all pulled that data of the IPs and all that, can you pull that data with user agents? And can we tell what tools and versions are most popular? Maybe that can give us some insight.
It's
Rian,
not
you dug into
possible.
that most recently. Go
Sorry?
ahead.
It's not possible to do that because GCI don't log that information. That's a problem because GCI will, the audit log just provides you, just tell you which layer I download, but not the user agent. And it's not even GCI, it's basically the GCS audit logs that provide that. So it's gonna be extremely difficult to try to pull that information. Okay, do we have any, I have two questions, but before that, do we have something else?
I guess the question is what's next? What's the next best step?
Okay, that's what my question. So EP and Caleb, where are we on account management for Amazon? Is it possible to get that by end of the week? Because that's the one blocker. The sandbox is already up and running. We just now wait for Amazon to fund the account and have access to account so we can try to synchronize those layers to Amazon. And my other question is for you and EP, where are we on the cap about mirror stuff? Because I think we have an ongoing cap about this. We also need to basically finish that caps to move forward. Because right now from Ben's side, the proxy is up and running and it's just wait to get those 2 point address to move forward.
Go for it.
I will interject really quickly. That's actually, I don't actually think that's the blocker to move forward. That's a blocker to move forward on finishing the like mirror piece, but we can already start to move forward on like getting confidence around just the plain redirect and potentially standing up a non-sandbox endpoint that is only a plain redirect and start shifting traffic now. In parallel to sorting out the Amazon piece and making the more complicated version of the redirector that looks at client IP and selects the backend.
I think my problem here is shift the traffic is not something we need to focus on. We should basically look at shift the traffic from Amazon to that registry.
Well, if we can get clients, if we start getting confidence in pulling clients through any redirect at all and potentially moving projects, K8s or something, then when we do introduce the AWS piece, it will work. I think the slowest part of this by far is going to be getting clients to use the new endpoint. So my intention was that we stand up something like registry.k8s.io and all it does is redirect to GCR. We have very minimal concerns about reliability. We'll get that tested and start shifting clients so that when we're prepared to switch that over to something that also serves from AWS, clients are already like in place. And we test that work at the sandbox endpoint. If we don't do that, I think even once we stand up the AWS piece, now we still have that whole long tail on getting clients to use the new domain, and we haven't made any progress on that.
I just want to double down on agreement with what Ben said. I'm, as a guy who just turned off his last 1.17 cluster, it's going to take forever. Hey, I mean, we all laugh, but we know how it happens, right? There's like, I mean, in my case, some scientist has went to something, you know, and I can't do it. It's going to take forever to get a name change out there. So the sooner that we can get an FQDN out there that we can get published and start trying to ask people to switch over to it in their future releases, it's going to make all of these changes possible in the future. I think that's like absolute #1 priority.
Or we can basically convince Google to update KGCR IO to endpoint.
Well, but that one, I don't want to depend on that definitely happening. That's kind of in the same category of convincing SIG release that I want to go to every Kubernetes version they support and switch over the FQDN. I can understand where people are going to disagree with this. I don't want to definitely depend on those things happening. Whereas if we can stand up just a plain redirect now, which we have, put it on a domain that we really want to use for production later, know that it is like a very tiny little Go program that just serves a redirect and is running on some reliable infrastructure, and start migrating clients, then at any point we can flip it over to something that has the mirroring logic, and we will have shifted at least some of the traffic and we will cut at least some of the cost. If we wait to do that, then there's the potential that we don't get the case.gcr.io moved, and we don't get all these releases moved over, and that with that 117 shift, if we ship this in like 125, it's going to be years before we move the traffic. We probably should have set up just the redirect like a really long time ago. So we should stand it up now, I think, and just gain some confidence. Like, this is a dumb redirect. There's almost nothing to go wrong here. Let's get clients pulling through it.
Okay, another concern is cost, because if we shift that traffic, we also need to pay for that. Right now, Google pay the traffic for GetGCR.io. If we shift the traffic to us, we need to pay for that. Plus the fact
pretty much
it is
because
just
we're
the
302.
redirect. Yeah, like that should be a relatively small cost.
Okay.
And we aren't out of money yet.
I don't
can probably
know.
cut cost faster once we have the other piece in place. I would hope, I can't give actual numbers, but I hope it should be pretty cheap to run something that just responds to every request with a 302 or whatever.
The thing is, I think the traffic is huge. We can get number for that, but if I remember correctly, I think the traffic is a considerable stuff. So I'm concerned about the cost of that because we pay for the traffic on the load balancer, which
bandwidth will only be the bandwidth necessary to serve the redirect response, which is very small by comparison.
Okay.
It's not I think the naming also helps. We're calling it an OCI proxy, and it's a redirect. And so all it is saying it's not found, it's over here. And so the number of packets required and the bandwidth required is fairly low to say, go somewhere else.
Yeah, like for the first phase, it should just be a plain redirect. And we have that running at that registry stand. You can hit registry-sandbox at case.io, which Arnaud has already stood up, and it just works. And that's
I still some part I need to finish, but at the end at this point it's up and running.
There's no obvious flaws. We should probably set up another endpoint that's like registry.case.io, and we should freeze that in time with like no additional complexity. It's just a redirect. Let's start shifting clients to it where we can, and then we can follow up with, okay, we got that in place. People can independently work on engaging folks to move clients, while we also work on the AWS infra and the more advanced redirect. And ensuring that that's stable. Sorry.
I was gonna say, what needs to be done to make that a production ready deployment? I mean, is it like Terraform to spin up GKE. There was talk on the document of using Knative. I mean, like, I'm happy. I'm happy to help as much as I can here. But what's the action plan?
The infrastructure part is already done.
Oh, well. I'm glad I volunteered after the work was done.
But not in all the region, because basically it's based on Cloud Run, and Cloud Run is like a serverless platform. So I think the most complex thing is understand the mechanics of Cloud Run, because Cloud Run is very open here about concurrency and resource allocation. So I think I want to agree on Ben about this. We should move all the test infrastructure to that new endpoint and see what's happening. And later we're basically trying to make that communication over the entire community and see what's happening. And I think I would like to have input from John, because I'm trying to basically get the production readiness requirement for this if we want to shift that traffic. Not in this call, but we can talk about later.
I think basically what Arnaud has already set up from the code that I've already put in the OCI proxy repo, we can start getting test workloads on that. Like, that's available today. As soon as we have some confidence, just within the few of us here, that looks reasonable, we can start discussions about, okay, let's set up another domain for it that's the real one that we actually want to move people to, and start shifting it. But because it has just been set up like this morning, I don't know, we probably want to do some more sanity checking, run a little bit of like test workloads through it and stuff, make sure that there's no surprises.
So I plan to move some stuff by end of the week on this endpoint, see what's happening, because there are some tweaks we still need to do with the current setup I made.
Also, there is some background discussion. I know Justin is particularly looking at, like, what if we do this with some GK clusters and things like that. Arnaud and I opted to go with Cloud Run for now, just because staffing is hard, and we're looking for something that's like hopefully reliable and doesn't require work from us to get the endpoint in place. But longer term, like, I can certainly see arguments for, like, maybe the community wants to use like more open source oriented solutions even further, or that sort of thing. But I think we should like press forward as quickly as we can with just getting the very simple version in place for that move. And I think we're good to go on that. We need to run a little test workloads against the sandbox endpoint before we set up a real endpoint.
I was actually on board with the Cloud Run thing. I did say Knative and GKE. I just misspoke.
I mean, I do think that's something we may have to consider, like what is going to turn out to also be itself the most cost efficient to run the redirector and like most reasonable for the community. But like, I think this is a good starting point for us on, in theory, like we just give them the container image and it's a stateless HTTP service. We shouldn't need a lot more from this. We don't need microservices talking to each other or like any of the wonderful things that K8s brings. We just need one container globally, serves HTTP, does a redirect, no state, no storage.
The point we chose Cloud Run is basically quickly eliminate Cloud Run if we face some hiccups and move by because GK can be the default option for this, but we want to basically try Cloud Run and see what's happening with Cloud Run. So I think the goal here is set up, bootstrap that sandbox environment, shift the test infrastructure traffic to that, see what's happening in Cloud Run over the entire GCP infrastructure, and make that call and see if we can basically use Cloud Run for long term.
Eddie also has a good point here that was in the back of my mind that I forgot about, which is like how do knowing what the traffic is actually like. I think the one complication we should consider adding to this is just serving some metrics and collecting those, and that may be something we can get folks to help on standing up something for that. We probably want to go back and before we actually set a hard cutoff on like, we're not making this tool more complicated for what's serving the just move the traffic. We should probably add like some Prometheus metrics or something so we can start getting some idea like what is the actual scale, or
Cloud
maybe
Run provide metrics
that for us. I don't know.
Cloud Run provide metrics by default, if I remember, and I think we can basically export those Cloud Run metrics inside Google Cloud Monitoring. So I don't think basic monitoring is an issue for us right now.
I was looking at the pricing for Cloud Run, and it's like we can't figure out how long the CPU and memory is going to cost, but the flat request we can start to ballpark. It's like 2 million requests are included, and then 40 cents per million requests after that, right? So that can give us a nice ballpark there. So whatever we can get in terms of that, to say like we cut everything over and magically everyone uses it, it will cost this much.
Yeah, I still suspect unless the pricing structure turns out to be insane, it's gonna be really challenging for it to cost more if we can shift the traffic, because most of the traffic should be downloading the layer blobs, and we're going to be handing that off to whatever the actual backend is anyhow.
Yeah, no, I'm not worried about it costing too much. If we have the data to figure out a ballpark, so we should do that.
Well, I want to leave some room for like, if folks want to come work on some other way of hosting it and we're going to be able to staff that, like, I'm not stuck on that. I just think this is a good way for us to start from. We should get that domain up. We should move clients, and we should leave that alone so that we don't have to worry about like reliability of the buckets or whatever it is that we're concerned about. We should start with the moving it. I think we can do that now. I at the same time though, I think Arnaud and I pretty much have getting that endpoint stood up, but there's going to be a lot of work going around and like vetting it and getting things moved over to it that can happen totally in parallel to like developing the mirroring piece as well. So potentially if folks want to help like engaging with projects to start trialing the redirector might be something folks can do in the very immediate future.
You can tweet it. I think you can tweet it. Stephen,
You want designated tweeter? I can do that.
So we're out of time almost. Any last minute thoughts while we wrap up here?
I'm hesitant to even mention this, but once we're moved off of GCR, what is our exposure to like things like a DOS? I mean, if we're talking about this being the endpoint that's production ready, do we think about Cloudflare?
DDoS is responsibility of GCP because we use the GCLB for that to serve that endpoint. So we are covered by the SLA of Google GCLB. I'm not really worried about that. I think my main concern is we don't have a web firewall in front of it, so we still exposed to some kind of abuse. We need to think about it, but I don't think we are a good target for DDoS, but I can be wrong.
It's also a stateless go up with like no per request allocation, so we should, other than whatever Go needs internally for that, so we should be pretty fine behind it.
Well, there's the traffic and then there's the CPU, right? So I mean, if it spins up 1 million containers to start servicing load.
It's true, but that's, I think, actually just what it looks like when people are pulling from us normally.
Fair.
I think we had some numbers on that in terms of like what the bandwidth looked like to like GCS.
I think it's 1 gigabyte per day. I need to check something.
I think
I need
Ken
to
was saying something like a terabit to AWS for the GCS piece. So
I think that's monthly. I have a dashboard for that. I just need to redesign the dashboard for it. I think we're done here. Any question?
With the WAF point of view, you could always put Cloud Armor in front of it if that became a bigger problem.
Yeah, I plan to do. Cloud Armor is complicated because we still have limitation with the current plan we have. We can basically use the most advanced feature of Cloud Run because it's very expensive for us.
It's like $3K per month if you want that
Yeah,
advanced protection.
exactly. So we have limitation about Cloud Armor. So, but we can basically put in place some kind of basic policy that prevent us from some kind of abuse in the future.
Well, if it's almost end of call, I want to apologize again for like huge foot and mouth at the beginning. And
it's okay. It's
thank
happening to everyone.
for coming in, all the like help just with this. I'm really glad to see everyone here.
Okay. So please talk to the community about this new sandbox registry. And have a good day, everyone.
See you later.
Thanks, everyone. Later.